on a group tour of Greece, now on the mainland on a bus going west from Athens. We're headed for the Peloponnese Peninsula. We're going to visit sites containing 4 ages of ancient Greece. Our first stop would be the Bronze Age, the time of the Mycenaeans. Then, the Archaic period, the time that I think of as the art of long hair and big thighs. Finally, the Hellenistic and Classical eras, when the Greeks created some of their most beautiful art. We arrived on the Peloponnese Peninsula and the Bronze Age fortified hilltop city of Mycenae, a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Mycenae is celebrated by Homer in his epic poem, the Iliad, as the seat of King Agamemnon, a leader during the Trojan War. We went to the Archaeological Museum and its relief map of the walled city. German explorer Heinrich Schliemann's excavations in the mid-1870s revealed objects whose opulence and antiquity seemed to correspond to Homer's description of Agamemnon's palace. Schliemann attributed this gold grave mask to Agamemnon himself, but it's actually not his and dates to about 300 years before his time. The weapons, crown, and jewelry were found in shaft graves, a style unique to Mycenaean sites. The Mycenaeans had several cities, were fierce warriors, bold traders, and great engineers. They designed and built remarkable bridges, fortification walls, water systems, and beehive-shaped tombs. They worshiped female gods, represented by some of the ceramic figurines in the museum. Many were found in the graves and scattered with household goods in Mycenae. Their ceramics show great skill and have been found as far away as Egypt and Great Britain. The circulation of Mycenaean goods is traceable thanks to nodules, ancestors of the modern label. Mycenae was the main center of the Greek Bronze Age world and spread its influence through the entire Mediterranean basin. Their offensive arms were made of bronze. Spears, javelins, and swords of different sizes were found. Arrows attest the existence of archery, and there were daggers and axes in the graves. The war between the Greek coalition and Troy, immortalized in Homer's Iliad, may well have been planned in this very place. Helen may have been pursued by Paris and Agamemnon from Mycenae, that launch of 1,000 ships. The Trojan War lived in oral tales until Homer wrote the poem many years later. However, the Bronze Age Mycenaeans did have writing we call Linear B, an early form of the Greek language. The Treasury of Atreus, also known as the Tomb of Agamemnon, was also constructed during the Bronze Age. The Mycenaeans buried their nobles in these beehive tombs. large circular burial chambers with a high vaulted roof and a straight entry passage lined with stone. This one was used for an unknown period and was still visible in 1879 when the explorer Heinrich Schliemann worked at the site in Mycenae. The lintel stone above the doorway weighs 120 tons. The doorway is 18 feet high and tapers toward the top, making it appear even more impressive as you approach it. With an interior height of 44 feet and a diameter of 47.5 feet, this was the tallest and widest dome in the world for over 1,000 years, until the construction of the Pantheon in Rome. When it was constructed, the stonework was decorated with bronze rosettes and motifs attached with nails. Segments of the columns and architraves were removed by Lord Elgin in the early 19th century and are now held by the British Museum. Its monumental shape and grandeur make it one of the most impressive monuments surviving from Mycenaean Greece. The fortress of Mycenae sits atop a hill mirrored behind by a larger hill. When Schliemann walked through its lion gate, he knew the site concealed great riches. He found in it both intriguing historical connections and a golden treasure which he excavated from the burial circle. He thought he had found the treasure of the great king from the Iliad. When Schliemann excavated the shaft graves here, in this circle, he discovered the golden mask. "I have gazed on the face of Agamemnon," he said. There may well have been a war between the Mycenaean coalition and Troy, but the shaft graves themselves date from an earlier Bronze Age period and were not the graves of warriors who went to Troy. There are different types of residences on the hill. The smallest are the houses of artisans. On a more developed level are found larger residences made up of many rooms and central courtyards. These homes contain the pottery, female gods, and various other ceramics shown in the museum. palace sat at the very top and was opulent indeed. It watched over its surroundings and could see down to the different types of vaulted galleries, gates, access ramps, and hidden doors for escaping in case of siege. Fear of attack meant that the site must have a cistern or a well at its disposal. Today, you can climb down into the cistern or view the ancient well that held the lifeblood of the city of Mycenae. Mycenaean walls were made in a fashion called cyclopean, as early people felt that only a cyclops could have lifted such stones. Lifting the largest, 26 feet thick, fitted without mortar, was quite an achievement over 3,000 years ago.
We drove over to the city of Olympia and checked into our hillside hotel.
Cheese factory. We make feta cheese, the original feta cheese, without special machines like the new factories. We are very lucky because today is a day of work. We don't make cheese every day.
When we go there, 25 degrees Celsius.
Salt in there. Tomorrow morning we will put it in the barrels.
This is how we buy the feta in the supermarket.
And
it's
gonna be strong enough with salt. This one has salt. When we will put it in the barrels, we will close the barrel, and first of all, we are going to let the barrel in another room in temperature from 18 to 22 for at about 2 weeks, and then we take it to the central refrigerators for 2 months, 60 days. After 2 months, we can sell it anywhere we want. Not before. Not before.
The Archaeological Museum of Olympia is one of the great museums of Greece. Olympia is located in an ancient grove of trees and was established toward the end of the Mycenaean period. Olympia grew to include the renowned Temple of Zeus, completed during the Greek classical period. The museum contains the temple's 2 pediments. The west one features Apollo and the fight between the Lapiths and the Centaurs at a wedding. The figures which fill out the remainder of the pediment include other groups of centaurs attacking women and children, as well as Lapith men struggling to free them. The east pediment features a scene especially appropriate at the home of the ancient Olympic Games, which began in 776 BCE. Athletes competed in view of the temple until the games were terminated by the Christians in 393. On this pediment, preparations are being made for a chariot race, which explains why there are horses flanking the 5 central figures. In front of the Temple of Zeus was a statue of Nike on a tall pillar. This winged victory was sculpted of Parian marble, completed in classical times. She is the goddess of strength, speed, and victory. There are fragments of the Temple of Hera, one of the most important female deities in the Greek religion. Her beautifully painted temple with its distinctive disk of Dionysus was destroyed by an earthquake. Today, the temple ruins are where the lighting of the Olympic torch takes place. Phidias was a master sculptor, painter, and architect who lived during the classical period and is commonly regarded as one of the greatest of all sculptors of classical Greece. He had a workshop at Olympia, and there was found a small black wine cup, which was inscribed, "I am, the property of, Phidias." Offerings of all kinds were made at the temples in Olympia. Numerous helmets were excavated. On this one, an inscription reads, "Miltiades dedicates to Zeus." This is the same helmet worn by the Athenian general in the Battle of Marathon in 490 BCE, where his army defeated the Persians. He thus offered his helmet to Zeus as a sign of gratitude. Other helmets, dedicated by unknown soldiers, are moving symbols of the military might of ancient Greece. Armor and small statues were also excavated, no doubt also offering to the gods in Olympia. One of the masterpieces of ancient Greek art is this stunning Parian marble god Hermes carrying the infant god Dionysus. Hermes stands 6.5 feet tall. He was discovered in 1877 in the ruins of the Temple of Hera. We had dinner in the garden that night, surrounded by roses, enjoying some good conversation, while the sun set slowly over Olympia. The Olympic archaeological location is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It sits in a grove in a valley in the Peloponnese Peninsula and has been inhabited since the Mycenaean period. In addition to temples, there are the remains of sporting structures erected for the Olympic Games, which were held in Olympia every 4 years beginning in 776 BCE. The gymnasium functioned as a training facility for competitors in the Games. It also was a place for socializing and engaging in intellectual pursuits. The name gymnasium comes from the ancient Greek gymnos, meaning naked. Athletes competed nude, a practice said to encourage aesthetic appreciation of the male body. The grassy open courtyard is surrounded by pillars and seats for resting athletes.
We are here outside Leonidas, the five-star hotel. A huge complex with columns around supporting the roof, Ionic and Doric inside. And later on, a fountain was constructed in the center. Scholars believe it had 2 floors on the small sides, and it was erected by Leonidas. The donor was Leonidas, who was a very wealthy man that came from the island of Naxos, and that was the hotel where the VIP persons used to stay. That is, ambassadors, delegations, officials that came to see the Olympic Games.
Next to the Olympic accommodations is the workshop of the sculptor Phidias. His rectangular workshop was built of the local shell limestone and had the same dimensions as the cella of the Temple of Zeus, which is just next door. It was here that Phidias created his giant statue of Zeus, considered one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Today there are Roman bricks that were added to the workshop after the Romans took control of Greece. The building was ultimately converted to an early Christian basilica. That basilica was subsequently destroyed by an earthquake. Among the ruins was found the wine cup with Phidias' name inscribed on it.
Because only the Greeks could participate in the Olympic Games. So the best proof of the Greekness, of the Greek identity of the Macedonian kings is this temple, which was built by Philip II in 338 BC in order to commemorate his battle in Heronia and also to commemorate his victory in the chariot races. So his chariot participated in the chariot race, and he erected this temple, which was beautiful.
The circular memorial in shell, limestone, and marble contained the ivory and gold statues of the family of Philip II of Macedonia, including himself and his son Alexander the Great. It was the only structure at Olympia dedicated to humans. The giant single column is all that now stands of the massive Temple of Zeus. Built in the classical period, it was the very model of the fully developed classic Greek temple. It housed the renowned statue of Zeus, which was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. The Zeus statue was approximately 43 feet high and was made of ivory and gold by the sculptor Phidias in his workshop next to the temple at Olympia. Phidias took about 12 years to complete the statue. In front of the Temple of Zeus was that statue of Nike, goddess of victory. Nike was depicted as a winged young woman, triumphant on this pillar. She is represented on the modern Olympic medals of Athens in 2004 and again in Beijing in 2008. The Temple of Hera, erected in the beginning of the classical period, was another of the venerated temples in Greece. The statue of Hermes holding Dionysus was found in her ruins. Winners of the ancient all-female foot race held in the stadium at Olympia had the right to dedicate their statues to the Temple of Hera. The temple also held the table where the olive wreaths for the victors were displayed during the men's Olympic Games. Today, Hera's temple is the location where the modern Olympic flame is lighted by focusing the rays of the sun on a parabolic mirror. Of course, when we think of Olympia, we think about the Olympic Games held every 4 years beginning in 776 BCE. The Olympic Games were closely linked to the religious festivals of the cult of Zeus. The ancient games, including running, long jump, shot put, javelin, boxing, a kind of boxing wrestling match, discus, and equestrian events. Only free male Greek citizens were entitled to participate in the ancient Greek games, but later Romans were allowed to compete, most likely because they were running the Greek world by then. Married women were not allowed to participate in or to watch the ancient games. However, unmarried women could attend the competition, and the priestess Demeter, goddess of fertility, was given a privileged position next to the stadium altar. The games were dedicated to the Olympian gods and continued for nearly 12 centuries, until the Roman Emperor Theodosius decreed in 393 that all such pagan cults be banned. 1,500 years after the ban, in 1896, the International Olympic Committee, initiated by Baron Pierre de Coubertin, held the first Olympic Games in Athens. Standing at the starting line at the stadium in Olympia, thinking about all the ancient games that were held here, made us feel privileged to have come to Olympia to remember the athletes who competed for the olive wreath and the glory of ancient Greece.
Entering the resort city of Nafplion, you pass by magnificent modern yachts moored in the harbor. Our bus pulled up to our luxury hotel, and our wonderful room overlooking the blue Aegean. Ever hungry, we went into Old Town Nafplion with its fortress looming above us. We found a wonderful taverna and had lunch. We returned to the hotel, unpacked a bit, and then went for a walk around Nafplion, a seaport town on the Peloponnese Peninsula. In the harbor sits a castle built to protect the city from pirates and invaders. Walls surround the citadel, which over the years have been held by the Greeks, Franks, Crusaders, Venetians, and Turks through time have added to the fortifications. Today, it's just a beautiful resort town. This former capital of the Republic of Greece is filled with reminders of the fight for independence from the Turks. Its architecture retains a Venetian flavor, and its streets are paved with marble. We noticed a monk coming down a side street. He was text walking. Ah, modern Greece. Buffet breakfast was served in the dining room. Then Van and I went out into the almost deserted town to take a morning stroll. We passed our taverna from the day before, lonely without the diners, and came into marble-paved Syntagma or Constitution Square. Here you can find the former mosque of the Turkish Aga Pasha. It's now the Municipal Theater of Nafplion.
The healing center at Epidaurus is the most celebrated in ancient Greece. This is the place where sick people went in the hope of being cured. There's a small museum at the site. Its most significant statue is that of Asclepius, healer god of antiquity. He holds his staff with a snake entwined around. It is due to him that our symbol for medicine is the caduceus. The museum contains some instruments used in ancient times, and an unusual testimonial from someone cured of an ear ailment. The temples at this center were covered with testimonials as well as beautiful architectural carvings. To find the right cure for their ailments, patients slept in a big sleeping hall. Their dreams were thought to be from the god Asclepius, and were interpreted as advice on what they had to do to regain their health. Today, masons work to restore the ancient classical period buildings of the healing center, baths, gymnasium, dormitories, and a stadium. Physical exercise and athletics were part of the cure. Even after the introduction of Christianity and the ban on ancient ways, the sanctuary of Epidaurus continued, although by then as a Christian healing center. Through the years, the center was looted by the Romans, plundered by pirates, and ultimately destroyed by the Goths. These steps lead to the UNESCO World Heritage Theater, also built in the Greek classical period. Theater was considered a health-giving activity. The original 34 rows were extended in Roman times by another 21 rows. As usual for Greek theaters as opposed to Roman ones, the view from the lush landscape behind the skene is not obscured and is an integral part of the theater itself. The Epidaurus Theater is a marvel for its exceptional acoustics, which permit almost perfect clearness of an unamplified spoken word from the proscenium to all 15,000 spectators, regardless of their seating. The huge theater is today used for performances.
The Corinth Canal connects the Adriatic Sea with the Aegean Sea. It separates the Peloponnesian Peninsula from the Greek mainland, making the Peloponnese an island. The canal is 4 miles long, with a cliff height of 200 feet, 70 feet wide at its base. The Diokos, a stone road on which ships were transferred on wheeled platforms from one sea to the other, was used because ancient engineers insisted that if the seas were connected, the more northerly Adriatic, mistakenly thought to be higher, would flood the more southern Aegean. At the time, it was also thought that Poseidon, god of the sea, opposed the joining. This fear stopped Julius Caesar and Emperors Hadrian and Caligula. The most serious try was that of Emperor Nero. He had 6,000 slaves for the job. He started the work himself, digging with a golden hoe while music was played. The first attempt to build a canal failed in 602 BCE. Modern-day work began in 1882, but several companies went bankrupt before the final Greek company was successful, and regular use of the canal began in 1893. Due to the canal's narrowness, navigational problems, and periodic closures to repair landslides from its steep walls, the Corinth Canal failed to attract the traffic anticipated. Aside from a few modest cruise ships, the Corinth Canal is unserviceable to most modern ships. Corinth Bridge is perfect for bungee jumping. We walked over to watch two young women put on their harnesses in preparation for a jump. Then we watched as a young man bungee jumped from the bridge. The action is stopped here to see him in free fall.
This is the monument of the fighters, the Greek fighters of the Greek resistance that fought in World War II, but because of those fighters in retaliation, the Nazi army entered the village of Distomo and killed in 1 hour 216 civilians, I mean babies, families. The names are written there.
The mountains around this area were a center for Greek resistance during World War II. Arachova is situated on the southern slope of Mount Parnassus, mentioned in countless Greek myths. Our hotel room overlooked this mountainous area. Some of our group went for a walk to visit a local rug stand, but it stood closed in the afternoon drizzle. Our true destination was a small cemetery. In Greece, the state requires the recycling of cemetery plots. Some permanent plots are available, but they can cost more than $200,000. If you can't afford this, you must rent a grave for a maximum of 3 years. By law, once that time is up, a cemetery worker removes the remains to an ossuary and the plot is rented to someone else.
You are Chef Mr. Christos.
Yes.
He's going to teach us secrets.
Yes, very important. Okay, we make 3 traditional recipes today. We start with moussaka. The second one is a spinach cheese pie, and the third one is tzatziki. I need 2 volunteers. Eggplant is much better to roast it in oven with a little bit olive oil on top and salt, because if we fry pan with oil, after it's too greasy. Keep too much oil. It's much better to roast it in oven when it's soft.
Right, 5 tomatoes, a glass of wine. Is it really? One half glass of wine, one half glass of wine.
Sandy and I volunteered to build a moussaka of eggplant slathered with stewed tomatoes, onions, and garlic and topped with bechamel sauce. Dina and Jim mixed spinach and feta, then covered it with a blanket of phyllo dough for a spinach pie. Jerry grated cucumber and combined it with olive oil and wine vinegar for a kind of Greek coleslaw.
Located in the Parnassus Mountains is the ancient oracle of Delphi, a UNESCO World Heritage Site. This seems always to have been considered a holy place. People came to consult the oracle, to obtain advice from the gods and help to make critical decisions. The tholos is a circular building constructed during the classical period. It was dedicated to Athena and was visible to those arriving from the east before reaching the main sanctuary of Apollo. Hence its common name is Athena in front of the temple. It had 20 columns on the outside and 10 on the interior. 3 of the columns have been restored, making it an iconic picture of the site of Delphi. The importance of the tholos is highlighted by a practice requiring those who came to petition the oracle first to offer a sacrifice at the round tholos and its patron god Athena, who was a guardian of Pythia, the priestess who gave the prophecies at Delphi. According to legend, the god Apollo won the oracle at Delphi for himself by killing the python, and its Pythia or Pythia oracle became a shrine of Apollo. Through time, the complex grew to include many temples and treasuries to hold offerings. By Roman times, there was an agora or market just outside the sacred way to the Temple of Apollo. The bricks reveal its Roman origin. All along the sacred way were dozens of memorials. The majority of them commemorated famous victories, including the serpent tripod made from captured Persian weapons, including those from the Battle of Thermopylae. The column was removed to Constantinople, where it stands today. The Athenian treasury sits above the entrance of the main temple and gives a good idea of the appearance of the many treasuries. It was erected in the aftermath of the Battle of Marathon and held some of the spoils from those Persians. The Temple of Apollo is now a ruin with 6 columns standing. The priestess Pythia sat here on a tripod above escaping methane gas, making her prophecies in a trance-like state. The ruins of the Temple of Apollo are from the classical period and the last of many at this location. The previous version was destroyed by earthquake. This final temple survived until 390, when Roman Emperor Theodosius I silenced the oracle, destroyed the temple, and removed many items to Constantinople in the name of Christianity. Then Delphi was completely destroyed by zealous Christians wishing to remove all traces of polytheism. Up the hillside, the theater, one of the best preserved in Greece, was built during the classical period. It has 35 rows of seats and could hold 5,000 with a view of the entire sacred site and the valley below. From 582 BCE, the Pythian Games were held here 1 year prior to the Olympic Games. winners were awarded a laurel wreath. There were 2 additional Panhellenic games, in Nemea awarding a wreath of wild celery, one in Corinth, a pine wreath was the prize.
Turkish money. Can I see? Can I see? Oh wait, I have. That's Turkish money. No, it's not all Turkish.
Did you have a 20,
Here,
Sandy?
I have a 20.
All right, all right.
Yes,
We good? We got our 20?
Okay, I keep it that. I take
Yeah.
man and I give you back.
Oh, great.
Hey, that's
We
quick
had
return.
a beer,
Yes.
2 bean soups, and one salad.
The Delphi Archaeological Museum contains the ancient artifacts found at the sacred site. As you enter, you are confronted with 2 giant kuri, or boys of noble rank. They date from the Archaic period, long hair, big thighs, and were found at the Temple of Apollo. Of the many offerings found are helmets and other military equipment. These may have been given in thanksgiving for winning a battle or for assistance from the gods before war. Countless offerings were uncovered. Speculation is that these items were buried in the earthquake that devastated the area. Atop a giant pillar stood the Archaic period Sphinx, presented by the people of Naxos. It stands 7.5 feet tall, and when on its pillar was over 33 feet tall. The Treasury of the Scythians is another Archaic period masterpiece, which had 2 female figures used as columns, supporting the cornice. In their heads are holes for attaching crowns. The Archaic period frieze around the Treasury of the Scythians shows a procession of horses and the gods Aphrodite and Artemis with their long hair, along with Apollo and a broken Zeus judging the outcome of the Trojan War. Some original polychrome on the frieze is represented here. The eastern frieze is the Trojan War from the Bronze Age, but was immortalized by Homer in the Archaic period when this frieze was carved. Trojans, Aeneas and Hector on the left, battle Greek Achilles and Ajax over the body of a dead warrior. The northern frieze shows a lion attacking while Apollo and Artemis shoot arrows at 3 giants wearing hoplite armor. These heads of Apollo and Artemis are from statues made from ivory which have turned to black. They are archaic style, found with their magnificent gold jewelry buried near Apollo's temple. These are fragments of the largest silver-plated bull of antiquity. Apollo holds the kithara, which is heard being played here. The column of dancers is from the Hellenistic period. The dancers are celebrating the feast of Dionysus. They stand next to the navel stone carved with a woolly net. This stone stood at the sacred site and it marked the center of the world. Also uncovered is the Hellenistic period Antinous, lover of the Roman Emperor Hadrian. The beautiful Antinous died young, and Hadrian had him deified and organized a cult devoted to his worship. The finest example of an ancient classical Greek bronze is the magnificent charioteer. He has onyx eyes, copper eyelashes and lips, and a silver headband. Originally, he had a chariot, 4 horses, and a groom. Dedicated to Apollo, he was created to commemorate a chariot victory at the Pythian Games.
The Battle of Thermopylae was fought in 480 BCE between an alliance of Greek city-states led by King Leonidas of Sparta and a larger army of the Persian Empire of Xerxes. King Leonidas went to the oracle at Delphi, who advised that he would die in battle. Thus Leonidas chose 300 men of his royal bodyguard, who had sons to carry on the family lineage, as he knew he would not die alone. The position of the Greek army at the narrow pass at Thermopylae was a tactical move. Leonidas had fewer warriors, but hoped that because the pass was tight, the Persian army would not be able to overrun the Greeks. During the ensuing battle, Leonidas was killed. The Greeks retreated to a defensive position and made their last stand until the Persian archers sent volley after volley of arrows, and all the Greek warriors were dead.
Another fried plate is this one. That's a mixed plate, a combination plate with the calamaris, that's the squid, the shrimps, and the smells, small ones. Fried. And you can have any combination you like. Calamari with the shrimps or just a small fish, whatever you like. Snapper. Snapper. Also grilled. And that's the short fish. Short fish. Yes, that's a fish fillet. No bone. Just in the middle, just a big one in the middle, that's all. Grilled as well. Are the mallets. The red mallets. They come fried. They have more bones than the rest, but they really taste. The mussels, which also come fried. And the best way to have those is saganaki. That's with fresh tomato sauce and feta cheese on the top. Now, about the prices. All the fish and the seafood come with fries and rice, and the price is 14 euros.
We entered the plains of Thessaly and stopped at a Greek Orthodox icon painting workshop. An icon painter demonstrated her skill at the easel.
First they draw the sketch by a pattern on the wood and then they carve it. Yellow color, it's called plate. The silver we produce here in the other department of the workshop. In the silver icons, the iconographers paint just only the faces here. The face of the Virgin Mary and the Jesus Christ. Not the body, because the body covered with the silver. The silver is the last part we put with the name.
The word icon is found in the New Testament of the Bible and was used to mean a portrait. Early in Christian times, there began a tradition of painting the face of Christ. In one story, an image miraculously appeared on a towel when Christ pressed a cloth to his wet face. Thus, in this story, the first icon of Jesus was self-created. Common Greek statues, whose worship was forbidden in the Christian Bible, were replaced by icons. Some did worry that the veneration of icons bordered on idolatry, but the practice continued. Statues were shunned as being too close to Greek cult practice. This avoidance has continued, with some exceptions, throughout the history of Eastern Orthodox Christianity. The pinnacles at the city of Kalambaka were formed about 60 million years ago. Our hotel had a fabulous view of them standing out against the skyline.
pork, little celery, another pork, and white cabbage and a Greek food. Specialty mama, pork, green sweet peppers, red wine. Mama. What do you like?
I'm gonna get the lamb. Lamb. Your plate. Do you want with rice or couple of Okay. All vegetables with no rice, yes? No rice. No rice, one potato? Just one. One. Enjoy your meal.
After eating in Kalambaka, we had free time to shop and look around the town. How about a souvenir t-shirt? The Pinnacles make a unique setting on the beautiful plains of Thessaly in Greece. We walked from our hotel into the countryside through wildflowers and a cricket serenade to the village of Kastriki. Kastriki is filled with tourist accommodations for people visiting the area. The Pinnacles loomed above us. One place offered a fabulous room with a view. Access is a bit difficult, however. After our long walk, we had a wonderful bottle of Greek wine, which we drank with our new friends, Mark and Sandy. Continuous weathering by water and wind, along with extremes of temperature and earthquakes, have turned these 60-million-year-old mountains into towers of rock. They're marked by horizontal lines that geologists maintain were made by the waters of a prehistoric sea. The wind has formed ancient caves that have been used for refuge through the ages. That night, we went back to the village of Kastriki for a home-hosted meal. The young family of 5 entertained us in the house they have renovated. It's made of 2 old barns that the family has joined together. They love that the old barns have been built directly against the rock of a pinnacle. Their van cat stood guard outside.
Gabriela had already seen my pictures because I saw that they said that this guy maybe will come. But she made a circle. All my photos were with, I don't know why. And when I went, I met her. The rest is history.
Did you speak Spanish?
Me?
Yeah.
Well, when it's about love, you don't need to speak.
Gabriela didn't speak Greek?
No. I speak Italian. I was speaking Italian and some words of Spanish.
Very simple.
She could understand me, and well,
Yeah.
The rest.
you don't need too much.
Yeah.
Well, we were married and lived. We lived for about 5 years in Argentina as a couple, and then we came back for my brother's wedding 18 years ago, and we still.
When you stayed.
Yeah.
Did your brother live in this town community also?
No, my brother, he lives in Thessaloniki. It's the second city of Greece in the north.
Okay.
Well, 200 kilometers from here in the north.
Yeah.
Okay, so what brought you here?
In the village?
Yeah.
Well, when we first came, my family is from here, and we were thinking about to go to Italy or to Spain or maybe in Athens to live. But, well, she liked the place very much. But also when we went to, because my sister, she lives in Athens. So we went in the beginning for maybe for a month to do some with paperwork, that we had for her. But I was disappointed because of the traffic, the kind of life. So we decided.
This is much better.
Yes.
Higher quality life.
Yeah, it's much higher.
Yes.
You can't compare it.
Yeah.
Our final day, we drove to the incredible area called Meteora, a World Heritage Site. Meteora means fallen from the sky. The drizzle that began as we drove created a moody, otherworldly feeling completely fitting with the celestial name. We were going to visit a monastery and a convent of the 6 intact Greek Orthodox communities in the area. The rain fell lightly as we walked the modern access to the monastery. In medieval times, these monasteries were almost inaccessible. We first visited the holy monastery of the Grand Meteora, built in the Middle Ages. As we climbed, we could see across the valley the holy monastery of Varlam, built at the same time. As the rain subsided, we rested in a wind-scooped cave where the first hermit monks lived, withdrawing from the world. As we continued, the fog rolled in, increasing the otherworldly sensation. We descended to the ossuary, holding the remains of countless monks placed here over the last 600 years. Then on to the ancient kitchen, where the meals were prepared in medieval times. This long board and the nearby metal straps were used to summon the monks before there were bells in the monastery. Out onto a terrace, we once again admired the awesome sight of the holy monastery of Varlam balancing atop its pinnacle, and then down on the village of Castriki, where we had been entertained the night before. The old pulley system has been left as evidence of how people and supplies were transported before any tunnels or bridges were built. Our admission was paid to a nun as we entered the medieval convent. Monks formerly held St. Stephen's. After the Nazis shelled it during World War II, the nuns occupied and rebuilt it.
Οικετεύω υπέρ σου των ιών μου και Θεών, είναι ατύχη συλλασμού, αλλά αυτός μη εκβοά του πάψαστε, και μη πρεσβεύειν στο σωθήνεσαι. Υπεραγία Θεόντα και σώσον ημάς, που φθήνα πάντων ανθρώπων αμαρτωλότερους χωρί, και δια τούτο προσελθήν το Υιό σου εδούμε, αλλά δισοπίσον αυτόν, και ηλαίων πίσων του δεξάστε, εν θερμή με την πίστη και πόθο προσερχόμενον αυτόν.
The terrace at St. Stephen's overlooks the city of Kalambaka. Initially, there were only hermits living in some caves and cutouts in the rocks here. By the end of the 1300s, an aesthetic community was fully in place. Then Turks began raiding nearby. They wanted to control the fertile plain of Thessaly. The hermit monks, seeking a retreat from the expanding Turkish occupation, found the inaccessible rock pinnacles of Meteora to be an ideal refuge. More than 20 monasteries were built beginning in the 1500s. The great height, combined with the sheerness of the cliffs, kept all but the most determined away.
Υπό τον άδειν υπαρχόν ανεβίβας της προσύψους, τες προς τον Θείον μου Υιόν, οικεσίες και πρόσχες, μη της προτέρης σου δίνεις, εμπέσεις εν κλίμασιν αλλά πέλθε, είσοδους μετανοίας, μήπως πάλι τη γέννη εμπληθεί.